So now that we've talked about the two contracting softwares, I am going to show you the basics of both today. And this is where we're going to dive into the actual process of building transaction packets. What is a transaction packet? We're going to start broad and work our way into the details here. So on our outline, number 2 here, what is a transaction packet? So what is that terminology that you hear from us? When you hear transaction packet, what does that mean? It's the required paperwork that you'll complete for every transaction. So your listing agreements, contract to buy and sell, your disclosures, all that stuff that you learned about in real estate school. That's what you're compiling and submitting to our compliance team. It's a transaction packet. And so there are 3 different types of transaction packets, and that's what we're going to review right here. So when you represent the seller, when you have a new listing, there are 2 transaction packets, the listing packet and the under contract packet here, the 2 right here, A and B. So I first want to tell you about the listing packet. So obviously there it says listing packet used when you get a new listing. And the thing that I want you to know right now about listing packets is when you get that new listing, your listing packet should be submitted 24 hours after your listing hits the MLS. So you might want to star that on your outline, or if you're taking notes, that is an important one. If you get a new listing, keep in mind that you have to submit a listing packet within 24 hours of that listing going on the MLS. Reason behind that, the Colorado Real Estate Commission, DORA, they often audit our files. And so what they're doing, if they check the MLS and they see an active listing with Equity Colorado, there's a chance that they could audit our files and they might inquire. They might send an email to Todd or to me and say, hey, provide Janet's listing packet for 123 Elm Street. And if we can't provide that packet to them, well, then you are going to get into some trouble, and Todd will also get into some trouble. You may be up against some fines. So it is an important rule there. And we do have some safety nets in place to make sure that you guys are submitting your paperwork. So real quick, every Friday, Parker Sperry, who you probably met, he's our administrative assistant. He cross-references all of the listings on the MLS with all of the listing packets that we have on dotloop. And if we see a listing on the MLS that we don't have a listing packet for, we'll shoot you a friendly email reminder that just says, hey, don't forget to submit your listing packet. It is required within 24 hours. Questions on that?
Oh.
All right. Janet, I apologize. This might be a little bit of a review for you, so I appreciate your patience.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm happy to hear it again.
Perfect. And this is just good. We are recording this, so it's going to be used for a video down the road. So I apologize your patience as you listen through this repeated information. But so yeah. So that's all I want you to know about the listing packets right now. We're going to talk about them in more detail, but right now this is kind of just an overview of the 3 types of packets, and we're going to zoom in and talk about the details of each. So one last little, just to paint the picture here with the listing packets, there's not too much paperwork involved with the listing packets. So all it is your listing agreement, the MLS printout, and then, a couple disclosures like the square footage disclosure, the source of water disclosure. You're going to be having your seller sign those right up front. That's what establishes the listing with our company. So when you submit the listing packet, again, it's just your seller's signatures at that stage, and then you'll add signatures to a lot of those forms as well. And then submit those to Equity. That establishes the listing in our system. So that's just setting you up for the next packet that we're going to talk about, B, under contract packet. And so again, it's still a listing transaction. So you're working with a seller here, but when you go under contract, in other words, when you accept an offer on your listing, you're going to go under contract. And then at that point, you're going to be adding the buyer's signatures to a lot of the items that you've already completed within the listing packet. So all those disclosures, the source of water, the square footage, the seller's property disclosure, all those documents that you've established in your listing packet, well, the buyer is going to be signing a lot of those now. And then you're going to be working on the contract to buy and sell. So that's what the under contract packet is. I always just like to explain that procedure. And so again, to recap, listing packet right up front, 24 hours. And then you're going to accept an offer on your listing. You're going to go under contract. And that's when you start gathering your under contract packet. And the two little notes, in addition to what we've discussed, for your under contract packet, you are going to add items to dotloop as they're signed by both parties. And so we have further details to come about that. But as I mentioned, when the buyer signs the square footage disclosure or the seller's property disclosure, for example, we do want you guys to upload those to dotloop. That way we can jump in and take a look at your file periodically as the process is unfolding. So I'll kind of talk about that in more detail here. Number two, as you're adding documents as the transaction's unfolding, it then goes into number two here, and it says, submit your entire packet to our corporate office about a week before the closing takes place. So again, you're going to be adding documents as you're going. And you're also, as new agents, Todd and Stacy are going to be reviewing some of those items as you're going, because there is a requirement we're going to talk about here in a minute. New licensees are also supposed to get the approval on contracts and listing agreements. We need approval by Todd and Stacy before your clients even sign those documents. We're going to talk about that in detail here, but the idea here is to add items to dotloop as you go, and then theoretically about a week before closing, you should have all those items gathered for your under contract packet, and that's when you'll submit it to our corporate office for final review. They'll take a look at everything and give you the green light to proceed to closing. So is that making sense? I know I threw a lot of details out, but you guys following me on that one? I'm assuming no news is good news, so we're just going to keep on rolling. So those are the two packets when you represent the seller, when you have a listing. Now we're going to kind of shift gears, and I'm going to talk about the buyer packet when you represent the buyer. So as you can see here, when you're working on a buyer transaction, there's only one packet to submit. So, you know, when you establish that buyer agency agreement with your buyer, you don't have to submit anything to us right up front. I mean, like you do with a listing packet. You're just going to submit everything to us in one packet, the buyer packet. That being said, again, as I mentioned, Todd and Stacy are going to review all of your items before your clients even sign it. So I know you two are newer agents. So when you get a new buyer and you draft up a buyer agency agreement, just be sure to send that to Todd and Stacy to get their approval before your clients sign. So we're going to talk about that in more detail. But jumping back to the buyer packet used when you represent the buyer, the two items I want you to remember here, very similar to the under contract packet. You're going to add items to dotloop as they're signed by both parties. So again, get that buyer agency signed by your buyer. We want you to add it to dotloop so we can jump in and take a look at your file along the way. And then same guideline, about a week before your closing takes place, all of the items on your buyer packet should be accounted for. And that's when you'll submit to our corporate office for final review. So questions, concerns, you guys following me so far? All right, I'm going to take the silence as a good thing. So we're just going to keep on rolling. Right here is where I always like to mention the contract or business practice hotline. So when you guys joined us here, I probably mentioned our contract support hotline. And so just to clarify, I am happy to help with procedures and processes and dotloop and CTM and things of that sort. But if you have any contract questions or business practice questions, so the detailed items about all the forms you're submitting here, be sure to call the contract support hotline, business practice support hotline. It's listed right here for you. That rings directly to Todd and Stacy, and that's an email that Todd and Stacy are always reviewing so they can keep an eye on your contracts and help you feel confident out there as you're writing a contract to buy and sell or a listing agreement.